couple of quick updates. This is a bit of a sort of mid-roll experience for you in human form. That's unskippable, I'm afraid. In terms of a couple of important projects that we're seeing come out of IAB Tech Lab. One's more of an update and something to look out for, and one is a project that we're actively engaging with here, along with a few other markets, that's really underway in the US in particular. So to start with, and just a note, so IAB Tech Lab's the sort of tech group within all the IAB franchise, which you find individual IABs around the world, but at the heart of it technically as IAB Tech Lab, that actually do not only oversee specs and standards, but roll out bits of software that they iteratively improve upon with updates over time. So they've been looking at, since the explosion of CTV, the level of sort of innovation and creativity that you're seeing has led to the opportunity to actually do things from a sort of bottom-up rather than the top-down perspective in terms of standardization. So the current portfolio of assets and formats, fairly vanilla, if I'm allowed to say that, in terms of linear and non-linear and some companion ad formats. So to really get a sense of what's happening across the global markets, they ran an opportunity to submit different formats globally. I think the majority were admittedly from the US, some from the UK. I don't know if any came in from Oz, but we pushed it around a fair bit, particularly amongst specialist councils. So to see the various formats that are out there, over 100 were submitted from about 40 or 50 different companies. And they trawled through them and worked out in terms of 8 formats that they want to bring into standardization to release in a new portfolio that will come out towards the end of this year. So I thought I'd take this opportunity just to go through each of them. There are 8 of them, and some of them you, particularly specialists, might have seen before, some may not. By the way, all the slides here you'll get, at least certainly mine, it might not be the case with everyone's, you can access afterwards, and I'll send some links through too so you can see the specific examples, particularly on my second topic. But we thought we'd show you each one in turn, just so you can take a look and have a think. So in terms of standardization, depending upon the consumer experience and the UI and the software of a particular device, having some standardization for this, I think, would become as a relief to everyone. So in terms of menu ads, we know how popular there are, so this makes sense to me to see that being incorporated. Pause ads. So this is the one that got an enormous amount of positivity from the survey that followed up across industry that's mainly in the US in terms of the consumer pausing the video and then the ad playing, and then there's a user initiation process here that's interesting, and it can be interactive. Screensaver ad, so this is more interruptive in terms of it actually happening to the consumer and then them choosing to dismiss it. And again, there's interactivity, audio off by default, which is more of the standard now in terms of the new formats for video that we've seen come out and how they've been labeled. So, you know, that's a version of the pause, but a little more interruptive and a different layer of control. So this is sort of good old school non-linear, the sort of banners we're kind of used to, surrounding the content a little bit more. And I think it's important to have that level of standardization around what those opportunities are based around the content. So this, I mean, as a sports tragic, I kind of recognize this experience. And again, you know, for standardization of that, I think it's interesting to see, and also quite like the various different names. So this one, it particularly feels something, I mean, this is a strong companion opportunity for those that wish to interact with consumers and see some form of sort of direct response related activities that happen as a result. And again, I think there's been a lot of different versions of a companion ad. So it'll be interesting to see how the specifications actually allow for the right level of flexibility in terms of the creativity here and also the results, right? This feels, to me, I'm no video expert, but a bit more like in gaming, isn't it? And it'd be interesting to see the creative outputs that come as a result of how you manage to provide this as an in-scene ad, but I do love the look of it. And then lastly, known as immersive or extendable. So particularly, I think, powerful for sort of commerce-driven activities based upon these formats. But that's your 8, which will come through, as I mentioned, in terms of specifications as a standard portfolio that will be published towards the end of the year, which we'll look forward to going through. And then this was some of the feedback that they'd seen as a result of the survey based upon what the buy side were sensing, the sell side, and just that ability to have some more creativity enabled through standardization, which is exciting. So we can share links to the findings of it and some of the survey reactions, and it'd be interesting to see if we see more sort of creative examples of these formats come through. The Tech Lab product lead mentioned August 2025 to me, so I just thought I'd be a little more conservative and kind of stick Q4 calendar year in. But I hope you find that interesting. I think it's very important, he says, falling up the stairs. And how familiar or new does that feel? Are there ones there that you've seen before? Is there anything that's explicitly new, or a bit of both? Looking for nods. Head shaking. All right, well, let's see how that goes. But I think what's important is the approach. The fact that we're doing it from a bottom-up rather than a top-down, as mentioned, I think is genuinely important to enable some innovation in and amongst the standardization piece that we see a lot with standards. Now, so the Ad Creative ID framework, this is a project that we are working on here locally. So a number of the pain points, in fact, your poll point around cross-screen measurements, some of the requirements, in fact, with the magic wand, one of the panelists, and a lot of the more positive drivers in terms of what everyone's excited about are still being held back operationally by some of the limitations that we've got in terms of cross-screen and cross-media measurement. So there was a realization, I think there has been for a while, that was really dug into a survey last year. Well, I think there was one in 2023 that started highlighting it, but a one early in 2024 that was run out of the US that really pointed at the core problem that in terms of frequency capping, in terms of being able to actively reconcile post-campaign, but generally optimize meaningfully mid-campaign as well. It actually comes down to the creative level. So there can be podding that we saw in the OpenRTB specs and other ways of ensuring that we can manage the sequential ads that you might see in the consumer experience, let alone the performance side of it. But if without having that layer, that foundational layer at the creative level, and basically same ads being spat out as different ads with different IDs across different environments, it's really an important area that has to be figured out, and it's got to go back to basics really and figure out some of that foundational layer at the creative level across both digital and linear. So just some of these core basics that you'd expect to understand still are very hard to figure out. Increasingly, you've got multiple platforms, you've got multiple environments, different assets, obviously that difference between linear and streaming environments. And you've got, say, a video asset that's produced an ad. As mentioned, I mean, very often it's not just that there's a different ID associated to essentially the same creative, whilst it might end up in a slightly different format. You just don't know what's running where, it's called different things. And let's face it, even at the campaign level, very often you might have the same brand being called different things within the platform, different agency groups that are representative of it. We have an ops event that we've been running for over a decade every year. We've got one quick plug, 23rd of July in Melbourne. Come along and embrace your inner nerd. But I reckon the number one pain point that often comes up is, can you just call the same thing the same thing? Can we have some discipline in terms of naming conventions, which as an old school ops person is incredibly important. Just nomenclature, naming conventions, some discipline around that. And currently it's just not happening, particularly cross-platform, but even within certain broadcasters. So this is something that is causing a lot of headaches generally, and just the ability to be able to enable this, we've got to go back to establishing effectively a registry and finding a framework that can manage it both locally and globally. Because some of these core operational requirements remain critical, and obviously there's a commercial impact that was estimated to be sort of between 10 and 12%. So the Ad Creative ID framework's been worked on. ASIF, it was released about 15 months ago, initially in draft, and now includes a validation API as part of the process. So it does start with a registry, so having a local registry in each market, then driving standardization in terms of process, and having a directory to which you can register the various creatives and then be able to validate it via just a URL-based kind of HTTP request, so you know what you're dealing with, and having an API for validation thereafter. I don't think we need to necessarily go through the full framework. And also, there's a few additional slides towards the end, because I've only got a couple of minutes, which are there on purpose for you as a takeaway to be able to look at what we're doing here locally and also what each piece of the part of the industry needs to do to make this work. Because it needs to be a full court press. We need to work on this across from the production to agency, through to vendors and buyers and sellers. So it will be worked on across, I mean, particularly getting access and having engagement with creative agencies is going to be incredibly important in this process. But the benefits, I think, are very clear. Not only just sort of cross-platform, which that should be, it's not cross-publisher, but anyway, but also in terms of cross-publisher. So it's not just the problem of the various buckets where you're delivering the different assets that you're calling different things that are actually the same asset. It's also within one broadcaster with the different formats, the different environments, the different areas that it's delivering in, involves a lot of administrative pain that we need to figure out. So you can throw all the sort of artificial intelligence and automation and algorithmic power at it, but if you haven't got those fundamental foundational IDs to deal with, you're always going to find a lot of effort and pain in terms of the reconciliation process, regardless. Just a quick note that one thing in the US, so these are the markets that are looking at it, apart from us. In the US, they have something called Ad ID, which is a bit different. So that's established as a universal ID that can be leveraged for projects such as this. In other markets, ourselves included, we have to work on setting up a registry. And the good thing is that we will be linked in with the other European markets that are working on this. The French, Italians, and the Brits. Luckily, I'm going to Britain tonight, as it happens, so I can sort of nag them, because currently, in terms of being able to copy someone's homework, they're the cleverest kids in the class, apart from the Yanks. So being able to just see the approach that they're taking with a registry similar to the process that we have here with ClearAds, where there's a TVC standards process that it involves providing an alphanumeric ID as a key to each creative asset. It currently exists, and it's something that we can work on as a foundational piece of, as a foundational framework. So we are underway looking at that here. Locally, we're pretty far down the line. We're looking at the ClearAds ID. They've been really open and supportive in terms of making it happen. But we're still at that registry phase. So we're still at the beginning here. And once that's established, hopefully by in the second half of this calendar year, we can start working on the other bits. We're also working with Extreme Reach on this, who have been helping in other markets also. And then it's a case of, what does each part of the industry need to do and how we engage with them to ensure that we get that level of adoption. Because all the best voluntary standards working that way, where you can see it's mutually beneficial and there's an adherence and adoption to it that benefits everyone. So look out for that. And I will share some links and bits and pieces on both projects, but particularly this one. And if there's any specific questions, please just ask.